In this screencast, I will demonstrate how to pull Inkscape, Blender, and Gimp together in order to produce some artwork. I will illustrate some very simple steps that hopefully you'll take to the next level. I'll be using Inkscape version 0.46, Blender 2.49a, and Gimp 2.6.6. Let's get started. Okay, the first thing I want to do is give credit where credit is due. I got the idea for doing this from Christian, from Chris Design blog. And on his website, Christian has this particular artwork here where he used Inkscape, Gimp, and Blender to create it. Okay, he's got a nice little tutorial here. Head to his website and check out that tutorial. But again, I just want to say thank you to Chris because he was the inspiration behind my tutorial. Now, I'm not going to do anything like what Christian has done. I'm going to make mine much simpler, very screencast worthy. But it's kind of along the same lines. So thank you, Christian. All right. And I also want to explain too that using Inkscape for everything is not always the best way to go. Inkscape is very flexible, and most of the time I'm in it. But I also use Blender, Gimp, Scribus. Those are my graphic tools in Linux, and they're my graphic tools even at work in Windows. And that's what's great about cross-platform applications. You don't have to you don't have to shell out a buttload of money when you've got some very capable and free and open source applications out there. So as a graphic designer who's putting something together, you may want to use something that's very powerful for raster images, or something very powerful for vector images, or in the case of Blender, something very powerful for animation and modeling. And if you're into desktop publishing, maybe you need something powerful like Scribus. Okay, so putting all these applications together and as part of your arsenal of graphic tools is kind of important to a designer or to an artist. So you don't have to just stay in one application and do everything in there. Now, what I intend to show you, the extruding effect that I do in Blender, you can do that in Inkscape. We have an Inkscape effect, and I've shown in previous screencasts how to use interpolation to kind of get an extrusion. But those things take longer to do, especially in Inkscape, when you have to apply gradients and you have to know, where your light source is coming from. That's what you take for granted when using Blender. Blender is so powerful at doing those particular things. It's all automatic, and it just looks great. So that's why we use other tools. So you don't always have to use them, but if you want to use them, put them together and make your artwork that way. And that's what I kind of want to explain. Sorry, I have a very dry throat, and I know that's not great for screencasting. So hopefully I won't be annoying you with clearing my throat. So let's carry on. Basically, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with some text. I'm going to write screencasters. And we'll center that up. And I'll just use the same font that we use in our logo. So we'll go to the text tool. And I'm looking for stereofidelic. And I need to go back in and change the line spacing to 80%. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this 180 pixels. And I think I need to make that 180 pixels, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I need to make that a little bit bigger. So let's do 190. And then let's make this, let's try 170. Okay, that looks a little bit better. I'm just kind of trying to line up the left and right. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and center that up on my page. This step isn't really necessary. I just like to have my stuff in the center. And I need to convert this text to a path. Once I do that, I'm going to select my node tool. I'm going to grab all the nodes here. This takes a minute. and I'm going to insert new nodes. And what this is going to do is insert a node in between every 2 nodes. And the reason I have to do that is because this text is a little peculiar when I bring that into Blender and extrude it. It's got some openings in the vertices and it doesn't want to extrude very well. So by adding more nodes to it, I can kind of close up that. Okay, so that's my text and I've converted it to a path. Now, I just want to make sure that you guys understand that when you open up Blender, you can type out text just the same way you can type out text in Inkscape. It's just as flexible. But I like how Inkscape handles the nodes or the vertices a little bit better. It's a little bit more flexible for me, and it's something that I'm comfortable with. So just do what you feel is right, and that'll be good enough. So, okay, so here's my text. What I'm going to do is do a save as, and I'm going to save this as a file called ink.text.svg. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and replace that. I already had one on my desktop. Okay, and now I'll just go ahead and save that. All right, and now we will go to Blender. Okay, now when you open up Blender for the first time, you almost want to fall over backwards at the interface. I mean, it's kind of scary and intimidating, but really it's not that bad. You just see a lot of options scattered around, and Blender is very hotkey-ish, so it kind of takes a memory for some of this stuff. But you know, you get around the interface, you get used to it. So that's the way it is. So the first thing I want to do, though, is I want to set up my rendering environment before I talk about this workspace in here. And I want to make sure I set this to 16 so we have a high quality rendering. I want to change this option down here to Mitch for the filter. I want to select key here, and I want to select RGBA. That way when we render the image that we create in here, it'll have a transparent background. Okay, and we're going to leave this, when we render, we're going to leave this a 640 by 480 image. Okay, so all your stuff is right here for you, so just have to look around for it. Okay, and when you open up Blender for the very first time, you have 3 objects in your workspace or your drawing environment. You have a camera down here, you have a light, and then you have a 3D cube. So what I'm doing is I'm middle clicking and holding it down and just rotating. Okay, and this camera here, if we hit 0 on our keypad, you see that we've got this cube inside of the camera. So if I render this, it'll render a nice square. So in order to get a rendering out of Blender, you have to have a camera. So whatever the camera sees is whatever you get. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go back to View and hit Top, and I'm going to delete these things. So I'm going to hit X, erase. I'm going to right click on this light, hit X, erase. Right click on the camera, X, and erase. So I don't want anything in my document. And now what I'm going to do is go to File, Import. I'm going to import a path, SVG. I'm going to import an Inkscape SVG file. And I'm going to select this ink text SVG file that we just made. And I'm going to take the defaults on our import options. Okay. What that will do is bring in our text. Okay. Now, before we carry on, I'm going to select my N on my keyboard, and that's going to open up my transform properties. Okay, you can also get there from going to Object, Transform Properties. And what this is it describes the size and location of whatever object is highlighted. Okay, and this will help me in the next few steps. Okay, so we right click on our text, and I'm going to hit S on my keyboard. That gets me into scale mode. So if I just move my mouse around, you see how that scales. Okay, I'm going to hit 5 and then enter. And that's going to scale this thing up 5 Blender units. We see that right here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is grab a hold of these arrow handles and I'm going to center that back up here. Okay. And don't worry about these openings that you see in the text. That's just a graphic glitch. And next thing I'm going to do is, since my coordinate system point is out here in space, I'm going to put it where it's right here. Okay, so what I do is I hit center cursor. Okay, and what you see is flat text. So if I rotate my canvas here, you have flat. Now what we need to do is extrude it, and we can extrude it by going down here to this button right here called editing, and then we go to the extrude option, and we can select I'm going to go with a 0.03, and we can see that it extrudes our text, and that's what we want. That's what we're trying to get in the end. Okay, let me zoom in on that so you can see it. And Blender does a great job at extruding objects. They just have to be a path first. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I want to roll an edge around all of this, so I'm going to add a bevel depth. So I'm going to select on that unit, and I think we're going to do something like a 0.002. Okay, and then we're going to do a bevel resolution of 5. Okay, and I'll show you what that does. Basically what that does is kind of rolls that edge, puts a fillet or a radius on it all the way around, so that way our lights will kind of reflect off that edge and give us a nice little highlight. Okay, and I also like rendering with that too, because straight edges kind of get anti-aliased. Okay, so that's that. Now we want to color this. Okay, it's standard gray, and we're going to go to this shading icon, and then we're going to go to this materials button, and we're going to hit add new. Okay, then we're going to select on this little square here. Now it may look white to you, but it's actually gray. It's the color of this text, so I'm going to select that, and for this hex value I'm going to put in 990000. I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to give me this burgundy color. Okay, you see that there. Okay, now we're going to zoom out a little bit. Alright, we have that. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 lamps, and we're going to add a camera. Okay, we're going to add a lamp, so we do that by going up to add lamp, and here, okay, that adds this white lamp right here. That's what's going to highlight this text. And what I'm going to do is go to this transform properties. I'm going to type in 1.165. Now I'm doing this, but I don't normally do this when I'm not screencasting. I'm doing this now because I want it in a particular or a specific location for the sake of the screencast. I don't normally draw this way by typing in figures and putting things in the proper location. So you can do it, or you can just move it around, whatever you want. Okay, and we need to get the bottom one. That is a 5.585. Okay, and that puts my lamp up here. Okay, that gives us just a little bit of lighting down here. Now you're not going to see the lighting yet because I don't have it turned on. I'll turn that on in just a moment. Okay, we're going to add a second lamp, and we're going to change its location. Let me go to my notes here. And that's going to be a negative 0.040, I believe. Okay, and we're going to change its Y location to 0.200. We'll change its Z location to 1.645. Okay, that gets me just in front here, just in front of my text. It's going to be another lamp. And finally, I'll add a camera. Okay, and I need to change the camera location. Go back to my notes. That is going to be a 0.030. The Y will be a 0.065. And these are just figures that I came up with on my own. These can be anything, really. And we're going to change its X rotation just slightly. We're going to do a negative 2.400. Okay. Now let's see what that gives me here. I'm going to hit 0 on my keypad, and I'm going to see how that fits. And basically what we want to do is we want to get the text inside of this outside dotted line. This is my container for my camera. Okay, so looks like I'm a little close. So what I'm going to do is go to 0 here, back out just a little bit. Okay, we'll go to 0. And it looks like I got to bring this camera over this way, just a nudge. I'll go 0. Again, this isn't how I normally center things up, but this is how I'm doing it for this screencast. We're going to go down just a little bit. Actually, let's go up. Okay. I think that looks pretty good. Let me get this thing out of the way here. Basically what I'm trying to do, let me roll this up, is I'm trying to get this text kind of centered up and down, left and right inside of this container here. Okay. And I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to hit my 0 key to get me back on the camera mode there. And now I want to see what it looks like shaded. So I'm going to go to this icon right here. We're going to hit shaded. And now we see a nice shaded set of text. Okay, and that's what I want to export out of Blender. Okay, now the next step now is to render this. And I just want to let you guys know that when you render something out of Blender, it's very CPU intensive. Whether it's an image or an animation, it takes time. Now images they don't take that much time compared to animations, but it is very CPU intensive. Okay. One of the things that you can do in order to get a preview of a rendering, if you just want to do a quick and dirty rendering to see what things look like, you can bump this down all the way to 5. You can change the size here to maybe 50%. But what I like doing is hitting my N key on my keyboard. Where'd you go? Whoops, not my N key, it's my Shift P. Let me move that here. And what this is a rendering preview window. Okay, I'm going to let this go a second and let it render out in space. There we go. And basically you can make this any size you want by dragging it. But if I were to move it on top of my text, it will basically render that. Okay, so whatever is in the window here will be an actual rendering, and it doesn't render the whole thing. So if you just want to look at a certain spot of your illustration to see what it would look like rendered, this preview is very nice. Okay, so I think we're ready to render this. So what we do is we hit our F3 button and we render this. Wait a minute here. There we go. It wasn't F3, it was F12. I'm sorry. And this is rendering off screen. And the reason that it's off screen right now is because for some reason I got to turn on Metacity compositing in order to screencast Blender. When I have it turned off, Blender just acts crazy. I get all kinds of artifacting on my screen, and so I'm very conservative with what I do. But anyways, basically when you render something, it opens up a new box and it goes through and it renders your object for you. And you can see this is what we want. It's black here, but that's actually transparent. Okay. Once we render, we're going to close this after we render, and we're going to hit F3. When we hit F3, we're going to save that rendering. Okay. I'm going to call this let's just call this text rendering. Let's call it text render.png instead. And we'll save that to my desktop. Okay, and we double click that and open it up. We take a look at it and we can see that here is our text. Okay, very nice text. Okay, and your renderings always look way better than what you see on your screen anyways in Blender. That's the point of rendering. So, all right, that's what I wanted. So now we're done with Blender. So hopefully I didn't move too fast, but again, just back up the video, take a second look at what I did, and it's, all I can say about Blender. It's a very fabulous tool, very powerful, and it's very nice for this type of thing. So, all right, we'll go ahead and minimize Blender, and our next application that we need to use is Gimp. So we'll open up Gimp, and we're going to take our text render PNG file that we just exported out of Blender, and we're going to open it up in Gimp. And what I want to do in here is just add a drop shadow to this text. Okay, so we do that by going to Filters, Light Shadow, go to Drop Shadow, and I'm going to take all the defaults and hit OK. Okay, now what that does is it gives us a nice drop shadow under here. Now again, that's something that you can do in Inkscape, but if Gimp can do it in half the time or a fraction of the time, open up Gimp and get her done. So what I'm going to do is move this kind of out of the way here, and now I'm going to crop this. So I'm going to take my crop tool, draw it here in space, and move this up. By the way, if you're very interested in Gimp, then I highly recommend that you check out a Gimp screencast, very similar to what Richard and I do at the Screencasters, a screencast series devoted to Gimp, and it's called Meet the Gimp. And that's done by my good online friend, Rolf Steinert. He does an excellent job, so you might want to check that out. Okay, so anyways, we crop this, we double click, and here's our final image. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm just overwriting my text render PNG out of Blender. Okay, so we're going to minimize this, and we're going to go back to Inkscape, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this text, and I'm going to bring in my new text render PNG file, and I'm just dragging and dropping that from my desktop, and you can see that we have a very nice image. Okay, that's what we want. We wanted some nice 3D text, and we wanted a nice little drop shadow on there. I think that looks great. And again, that's something that you can do in Inkscape, but it just takes a lot longer to do. Okay, so we zoom out, and let's add a texture underneath this text. I'll bring in my wrinkle. I'm sorry, my wrinkles JPEG. This is like silk fabric, and let's get this thing back down where we can see it. I'm going to select this image, and we're going to give it a height of 600. I'm going to hit my lock so the perspective stays on it. And I'm going to move that onto my page, and I'm going to bump that all the way down to the bottom. Okay, and let's take a look at that. Okay, that looks pretty cool, I think. It's got a nice little rendering, an object right on top of silk. It looks almost realistic, I think. It's kind of a neat effect. Okay, so let's carry on. I want to add, actually, let me zoom back up on this. I want to add a little effect. We're going to draw a rectangle. And I got to make sure I can see it here. Okay, I think that probably looks pretty good. I'm staying just inside of my image. And I'm going to zoom out. Okay, I'm going to select my yellow color here, and I'm going to drag my circle and ellipse tool. And I'm going to put this about right here. Stretch this in, move this up. Okay, I think that probably looks pretty good. Move it just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is select this yellow ellipse. We're going to select this black background, and I am going to do a path difference. Okay, I'm going to select these black areas here, and I'm going to go with a 10 for a blur. And what I'm trying to do is kind of burn those edges in a little bit. Okay, and I'm also going to reduce its opacity. Let's try like an 85. I don't want to get it too bad there. Okay, I think that looks probably pretty good. And the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to add a little detail. I'm going to type the letter F. We're going to go to our text tool. I'm going to burn down until I find a font called Flower Ornaments. Okay, and I get that little thing like that. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And we're going to add this little detail on here. A little bit bigger yet. Okay, we'll put that about right there. This isn't really a necessary step, but you know, if you want to add a little extra detail, it's kind of neat. Okay, and I'm going to right click on that, duplicate, and we're going to make that copy black. And I am going to give that a 1% blur. And we're going to drop that down. And we are going to, actually I'll just select the text and move it straight up. Okay. And what I'm going to do is grab that, duplicate it, move that copy out here, and spin this around. And put another copy down here. Okay, that just kind of dirties up the image a little bit. Kind of adds a little extra detail. Okay, now what we need to fix is we notice here that when I made these black corners, when I blurred them, I've gone to the outside here. Okay, and what I want to do is cut that. So I'm going to draw a clipping plane. Make sure that's 100%. And what I need to do before I get too far ahead is I need to take all of this here and group it together. That way I can clip it. And we'll move this back. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on this. And what I'm going to do is select this black rectangle. I'll select my image behind it, holding the Shift key down, and we're going to go to Object, Clip, Set. Okay, now let's take a look at this. And I think this is our final image. Now, actually, if I take this here, let's do this. Nope, that didn't do it. Never mind. I'm not going to go ahead and do that. The blurring around this ornament here is it doesn't look like it's blurred. That's because the way that I have my settings in Inkscape. I won't go in and mess with that setting, but it's just a little rendering detail on my display, and it should be a little more highlighted or whatever. But anyways, let's get back to what I was talking about. Here I have 3D text on a silk background with a little ornamentation on there just to kind of dirty it up, bring it together. Again, this is something that, as far as the 3D text goes, it's something that can be done in Inkscape. It's a lot easier in Blender. I like how Blender does the highlights, and I like how the lighting kind of rolls off certain edges and whatever. We use Gimp to do a little bit of the drop shadow, so it looks like it's above the silk fabric. So that's my screencast. So I hope you found a use for that. Again, I want to thank Christian for inspiring me to do this screencast. And again, don't be afraid of other tools out there. Okay, it's okay to use Gimp. It's okay to use Blender. It's okay to use Inkscape. Use all those things. Use whatever it takes to get great artwork. Okay, so thank you for watching. I'm Heathen X.